Thanks, Lori, for that amazing introduction. I am such a fan of Smashfly and the work you guys are doing. It's really breaking through no boundaries, taking people to a whole new level of thinking about recruiting and about talent. And your comments about Generation Y that you just shared are so on the money. This is exactly what is going on as we've studied the workforce, that there's a fundamentally different view of work and the role of work in our lives and how we think about that fit around ourselves within an organization. So just thrilled to be part of this event today. And I feel like at some level I don't have to even talk. Like, you hit it so well, Lori. But alas, I've got 45 minutes with you guys. So let's dig in. And today I'm talking about the business impact of hiring with purpose. How do we really think about what is purpose? How does it impact recruiting? How does it impact the whole life cycle? And share with you some case studies, share with you some different techniques around how to really optimize to become an employer of choice, a purpose employer, a why employer, to your point, Lori. So love to do is start off with really talking a little bit about my background and how I came to this work. I'm a serial social entrepreneur, which means that I'm an entrepreneur, but I focus on social impact instead of just economic returns. And the great news is research now shows that being focused on purpose actually is the best way to be focused on economic returns. So in a sense, by being a social entrepreneur, just means I'm an effective entrepreneur, at least most days. My last organization was called the Taproot Foundation, and some of you may have heard of it. Taproot was a nonprofit organization that focused on recruiting marketing, technology, finance, and HR talent, among other business talent, to do pro bono consulting projects for nonprofits in need. The goal was to really help nonprofits have access to those resources that they can't afford. Many of them can't afford marketing help or technology or HR. And we said, you know what, if we can get professionals who are part of this Y generation that see work as being about more than a paycheck, we can help solve this tremendous need in the nonprofit sector. And over the course of about a dozen years, we grew to be the largest nonprofit consulting firm in the world, but then ultimately a $15 billion marketplace for pro bono services in the US, as well as having affiliates all around the world, people doing this incredible pro bono work, donating their skills, helping nonprofits. And as a process, I learned a tremendous amount about intrinsic motivation. Because when you're not paying people, you have to learn to lead, you have to learn to hire, you have to learn to manage through motivation, intrinsic motivation, not through money and promotions. In a sense, we learned what true leadership is all about. And what we heard when we were working with these tens of thousands of professionals was that I find pro bono work so much more rewarding than a paycheck job. I doubt that surprises many of you. I think a lot of people think about pro bono work as this incredibly rewarding experience. And for us, that was such a rewarding experience for us as an organization to actually hear how much of a difference we'd made in these people's lives, how rewarding this experience was. But in the back of my head, as I thought about this, I realized that it actually pointed to a big problem in our society. It pointed to the fact that pro bono work was so much more rewarding than what they spent the majority of their time doing. We don't spend the largest percentage of our work time in pro bono work. We spend it in our day jobs, in our paycheck job, as many of our consultants called it. And I realized that we can't continue to just offer supplements to make work more palatable. We actually have to change work itself. We need to figure out how to take what I learned at the Taproot Foundation and apply it to every job around the world so that people can be fulfilled in their work. And yes, they should continue to do pro bono work, but they shouldn't be having to do that to get meaning. They should get meaning from their core job. So I left Taproot and I started a B Corp, a for-benefit corporation called Imperative. And we're a software technology company that's working to really realize this big, hairy, audacious goal around how do we make all work feel like pro bono work. And sadly, as I started to dig into this question, full of hubris and excitement, the first thing I realized was I had been wrong about certain parts of what really mattered when it came to fulfillment and purpose. And then as I looked at the data from Taproot and really pulled this apart, I started to see there were myths that I had been propagating and that most of us hold about purpose that actually prevent us from experiencing purpose. So before I get too much into what is purpose and how it fits into a company, I want to share these myths with you. Because without understanding these myths, it's really hard to understand how to change the workforce to be able to suit the needs of this Y generation, as Lori said. The first myth, as you see here at the 40th Annual Charity Gala, is the myth that purpose and cause are the same thing. A lot of people looking for meaning in their work, they want to make sure it's tied to the right cause. They want to make sure they're working for the organization or the nonprofit that has a purpose or a cause that aligns with their cause, that they're meant to have a cause. And you can see this lady here on the slide. She is full of causes. She goes to every gala, she checks off all the boxes on Facebook, and she's a miserable human being. We found at Taproot many people in the nonprofit sector volunteer because their work isn't meaningful enough. We find doctors, we find teachers, we find people in jobs that should be full of purpose, expressing a need for more meaning. And conversely, we find people in jobs that you wouldn't think would ever have purpose, saying that their work is rich in purpose. We've got to let go of this idea that purpose is about the cause, or even that much about the organization's purpose. It has a lot more to do with the daily journey that they're on and how they show up in their work. This is so critical to understand. The other two myths I wanted to share beyond the fact that purpose is not about a cause is one, that purpose isn't a revelation. A lot of people believe they can climb to the top of a mountain, get struck by lightning, and suddenly have a tablet that tells them their purpose. We expect it to come from the outside and be given to us, instead of realizing that it comes from inside us. That purpose is a journey, and that we're constantly, every day, learning more about our purpose, learning more about how to show up as the authentic, incredible human being that we are. If we're looking for some outside force to give us that definition of purpose, to have that revelation, that's putting the onus and the blame outside instead of taking personal responsibility for purpose. And the final myth I want to share is a lot of people believe purpose is a luxury. It's not until you make a certain amount of money, it's not until you have a certain amount of stature that you can afford to focus on purpose. But in our research, we found people of the highest affluence who are miserable and have no purpose, and we found people in the lowest paid jobs who have a tremendous amount of purpose. There's no better example of this than the great work by Viktor Frankl, who many of you may know. He actually wrote in his book, and he's written incredible books and articles about the topic. He was actually a slave in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. Think about that as a job. And he found meaning in that experience. So anytime I hear someone say, oh, I don't have enough money, I don't have a big enough title, I don't have the yacht, I don't have whatever it is that's necessary to have purpose, I say, your job isn't any worse than Viktor Frankl's was. You definitely have more money than he did, so you can't continue to have that excuse. You create it out of yourself. It's not something outside of you. So before you can really begin to understand how to build an organization and a culture that appeals to this Y generation, that appeals around purpose, we have to really embrace the fact that these three myths are sitting there with each manager, each leader, and each employee and helping them get past them. Because as long as they're looking for something outside themselves to give them purpose, they're going on the wrong path. They've got to look within themselves. So then what is purpose? What I want to share with you are the three drivers we found psychologically bring purpose to someone. And they're all possible in any job, which is why there's no such thing as a purpose job versus a non-purpose job. The first is relationships. We gain a sense of meaning, fulfillment, purpose through relationships. It is very hard to have fulfillment for very long in our work without authentic, real human connection. And this is why in a lot of organizations, people report low sense of meaning, is because there's such an emphasis on being professional. There's such an emphasis on your professional self and your human personal self. And in creating that divide, it prevents people from having authentic relationships. So that's the first source of purpose in people's work. Second is impact. To feel our work is fulfilling, we need to feel like our work matters to someone other than ourselves. And it doesn't mean you have to personally solve climate change. It doesn't mean you have to solve a cause. It's simply about every day feeling like you're doing something that matters to someone other than you. And you can see an example in this photo. This woman's getting purpose sharing sugar with her neighbor who was baking a cake and wasn't able to finish without the sugar, and she's helping him out. Didn't solve climate change, but it made her day because she was able to make an impact. Sometimes it's these little things, helping someone smile at work, helping someone's job be a little bit easier, that actually makes the biggest difference. Finally is growth. What we found is even if you have great relationships and you're making an impact, if you're not constantly growing, if you don't feel like you're stretching, pushing yourself, overcoming fear, leaning into your potential, then you stop feeling a sense of fulfillment, even if you have the relationships and impact. So it's critical as you think about Generation Y, as you think about meaningful work, to be thinking about how are you empowering people to constantly stretch themselves? How are you challenging them to think about ways to grow? And this is not about taking a class always. It's not about traditional forms of learning. It's about creating little challenges for yourself. It's about doing things that just push you a little bit out of your comfort zone. So these are the three things that give us a sense of meaning in work. And when you're building a workforce and when you're building a workplace where this Y generation is going to thrive, what you're doing is building a culture in which people can have great relationships, make an impact, and grow. And you're removing barriers for them being able to do that. What I want to share next is what we've learned about the journey for an employee to really become a leader around purpose. We've seen that purpose-driven leaders are exceptionally more effective than those that are not. And a lot of this is tied to the fact that when people are inspired in their work, they're 125% more productive. 125%. That's 3 times more productive than an engaged employee. Engagement is way too low a bar. We need to be thinking about how do we have inspired employees. That is what the Y generation wants. They don't want to be engaged. They certainly don't want to be satisfied. They want to be inspired. And that requires having leadership that is courageous, inspirational, and is visionary. And that really requires starting early in the development of this talent. So what we see early on is that you have to create a discovery process for employees to get to this point where they have a desire for meaning. They need to want relationships, impact, and growth in their work. This is vital. They need to have self-awareness about what is their purpose, what brings purpose to their work, because we don't all get purpose in the exact same way. So they need to have that self-awareness, and they have to have the belief that purpose is possible in their work. Where we see the biggest break in the data is we find almost everyone has the desire. Far fewer people have the self-awareness, but there's a huge gap to people who actually believe it's possible. So getting past phase 1, you've got to have employees who have that desire, have the self-awareness, and have the belief. They then move into a phase of activation. This is where they start to see the ability to have meaning and purpose everywhere they look. They start to see ways they want to grow. They start to see relationships they want to build. They start to see impact that they want to make. They don't have to have it handed to them, but they start to see it. They then have agency. They start to actually hack their job. Just like in Silicon Valley, they talk about hacking. People need to be able to hack their job. They need to be able to have the agency to say, you know what, I control my sense of meaning in my work, and I'm going to change the way I approach relationships. I'm going to find new ways to make an impact. I'm going to change the way I'm growing, and I'm going to constantly monitor those areas for myself and make changes so that I'm never a victim. I never feel disempowered. I control my process. And then finally, it's alignment, where they start to get to a point where their work every day is increasingly aligned with what brings them meaning. And it starts to almost go on this natural flow when you're in this alignment, where people are just incredibly effective. And it's at that point that they're really able to move into being a purpose-driven leader. And I've now studied CEOs from companies, all across the country as part of my work with Fast Company magazine to really look at what is it that defines a purpose-driven leader. And it's really these 3 areas we see. One is courage. It's that courage to stand for what you believe in, to have the courage to not just go with the flow and to succumb to groupthink, but to have a backbone and stand for your values. The second is inspiration, the ability to bring inspiration to others, to help activate their purpose, to give them the courage to have that belief. And then finally is vision, of being able to set a vision for bold change, being able to have the ability to inspire people to take risk and to do things that other leaders aren't able to get them to do. This is the journey that you want within your organization to help people go on, from discovery to activation to leadership. A big part of this process is that piece around self-awareness. What is someone's purpose? And the answer is not about a cause. That's where so many people go. They're like, it's about one-legged kittens or four-legged frogs. Like, I need to figure out what my cause is. That's not what actually matters. When you've defined your purpose, it should be possible in any job. The second you say you have a purpose that isn't a fit with a job, it means that fundamentally you haven't defined your purpose correctly. There might be jobs where it's easier to get that purpose need met, but your purpose should fundamentally be tied to things that are possible in any job. And through studying tens of thousands of people, what we've come to understand is that psychologically, purpose is defined for an individual by 3 different things. It's about who someone wants to impact, why they work, and how they solve problems, how they unleash their superhero powers. So At that first level around who they impact, we found roughly a third of people gain the most meaning from feeling like their work directly impacts human beings, directly has an impact, and they can see that connection. They need that sort of visceral, close connection to their impact. At the next elevation, you see people who, it's great to help an individual, but they really say, I want to be able to help an organization. I want to help teams. I want to see my organization thrive. That's what gives me a sense of meaning, that sense of our communities thriving. And final is at the highest elevation is society. This group of folks really believes that the way to have the greatest impact, the impact they want to make, has to be tied to a bigger change in the world, in the community, in their industry. They want to bring in trends. They want to affect trends. So when you're able to define where you are on that elevation, it has a big impact on how you set goals. It has a big impact on how you think about celebration. And it has a big impact on just what you value in your work. The question of why comes down to work by Jonathan Haidt at NYU about moral foundation theory, and that people are on a continuum from karma to harmony. And karma is a mindset about individual responsibility and about individual liberty, and harmony is much more about the collective. And this has a big impact on how you think about change, and it's a huge impact on your leadership style. So karma is all about individual responsibility. It's about the fact that you believe in productive tension between people. You believe in competition as a core means of change. Harmony is more about, I want to make sure there's equal access. I want to make sure there's a level playing field. These are the things that really move you. And knowing where you are in that continuum is critical to understanding your purpose psychologically. Finally, there's a question of what's your superhero power? What is it you're bringing to create that impact on individuals through that harmony lens, or on organizations through your karma lens? And there's 4 different unique types of superpowers we found. One is around community. It's the ability to unite stakeholders to accomplish something they could never do themselves, to empower people, to really have people take ownership. And that is an incredible superpower that moves mountains. The second one is human, which is the ability to understand context and the unique needs of each person so that you can really create breakthrough solutions. The third is around structure. It's the ability to see patterns and design processes and to be able to replicate things so that you can start to really scale and think in terms of scale. And the final is knowledge. And these folks, it's all about being able to ask the right questions and to figure out what the right answers are, and constantly in a quest to figure out what is the piece of information that's going to unlock change. So when you combine your who, your how, and your why drivers, you really define what your purpose is. And this is what enables you to start to hack your job, to really have meaning, and to have belief that it's possible. And what we found is you basically end up with people in your workforce that are purpose-oriented. These are the people who really buy into their purpose drivers. These are the people who really put purpose at the forefront. They say, I work primarily for fulfillment and to serve others. And then you end up with non-purpose oriented workers. They are all about money and status, and they operate out of fear, and they haven't gotten to that point of belief that work can be about more than just making money and status. And it is so critical as an employer that you find ways to recruit people that are purpose oriented, and that you help create an environment in which they thrive, and that you work with the people on your team who are not purpose oriented to help them break through those challenges so they can embrace purpose. So why does this matter? Purpose has been shown to have a fundamental correlation to long-term business success. The folks who read the book Firms of Endearment found that companies that embrace purpose beat the S&P 500 by 14x. And this is even more exciting to me because I was a big fan of the book Good to Great. They beat the good to great companies by 6 times over a period of 15 years. So in the long term, these companies have staying power. According to PwC, they also found that purpose-oriented organizations are 202% more likely to report revenue growth. So purpose is what drives revenue. And 87% of executives believe they perform best when purpose goes beyond profit. So this is not a fringe thing. We are truly in the purpose economy. We are truly in an economy where purpose is what drives business results. But this also matters for individuals. When you embrace purpose, when you are purpose-oriented, you're 64% more likely to find fulfillment in your job. You're 50% more likely to become a leader. And you're also 51% more likely to have strong relationships with your coworkers, customers, and clients. The well-being, the performance of people who embrace purpose, and every single metric we measured was higher. Purpose is better for the organization, and it's better for the performance of employees. But as an added bonus today, we also find that purpose is good for the health of your employees. It's better for their psychological and physical well-being. It reduces things like stress. It increases cardiovascular health. It helps with resilience. There's so many different things that embracing purpose is good for. And we've not found any metric in which it shows it's better to not have a purpose orientation to work. This is the pathway to success for you on a health perspective and well-being, on a performance perspective, on a leadership performance, and an organizational level. The data has fully conclusively proven this to be the case. I want to talk to you about one company that we've worked with who's really embraced that, which is West Elm, which many of you may have shopped at their amazing stores. They're part of the Williams-Sonoma group, and they have completely redesigned their talent strategy around the science of purpose. They've changed the way they attract talent by changing the way they define their employer brand. They've redefined their job descriptions. This has changed fundamentally who's applying for jobs. What they found was when they change their brand, when they change the job descriptions, they got much higher quality people applying, but lower numbers. They didn't have to decline as many people because it sent out a strong signal. I think about Batman movies, right? Where when you're in need, you put up the bat signal into the sky and Batman comes. When you put out the proper job description to a purpose-oriented person, it's a sign in the sky for those people to show up, and they're the people you want to interview. They're the ones that are going to be the highest performer. West Elm then started screening for purpose. So asking questions in the interview process to be able to really understand, is someone working to add value and for fulfillment, or is it about status and money, the signals that they're likely to not be as high a performer, that their well-being is not going to be as great? And then when they did hire someone, they designed the whole onboarding process around setting them up for those relationships that will make them successful, the impact and the growth. And this really helped set people up for success. But then they moved on to think about, how do we manage this process? How do we manage people through purpose? They changed the way they do communications. They changed their performance reviews to measure not what have you done for me lately, but ask the question, what was the relationship quality in your work these days, the impact, the growth? Their learning and development processes started to hone in on, how do you amplify those superhero talents? They even went so far as to say, you know what, if we're going to promote someone into a managerial or leadership position, they better show that they're purpose-oriented, because we know those are the people that are going to help this Generation Y. They're the ones that are going to help people who are purpose-oriented thrive. And they started to change the way they measured things. So they stopped measuring engagement, which is sort of the old model for thinking about employees, and created a measure around inspiration and fulfillment, which is a much more human, much more powerful way of measuring. So West Elm, is still early in this journey, but it's incredible to see how much of a difference it makes. And you go to their offices and you ask someone what they do there. They don't say what their title is. They talk about the impact they're making. And now Williams-Sonoma Group is looking at, how do we do this across their organization? How do you leverage this technology, the science, to change the way you fundamentally design work to make it something that's much more human, much more effective? I want to share with you now some specific tips on what we've learned around how to start to make some of these changes at your organizations, and to challenge you to really think about what you're doing. And I'm going to begin with the purpose-driven job description. So if you look at your job description, if you were to right now just pull out a job description of a role that you're hiring for, it's interesting how much unintentional language is in there that turns off purpose-oriented people, right? And when we found that employers go back and actually do that kind of audit and then start to rewrite job descriptions, it makes a huge difference. And what West Elm has done is they've actually said, anytime you open up a new job, you've got to go through a process of rewriting the job description and defining in the job description, what are the relationships this person's going to be building? What is the impact going to be? And what is their growth going to be? And these things are critical to creating a great job description. So the first question is, who are the people that the employee will be working with through the role regularly? Where will they be able to build strong relationships? And if you look at that and the answer is no one, you've designed a bad job. So it's a good test right there. But to really think about, who are they going to be working with? Who's on the team? Who are the customers they're going to interact with? What kinds of interactions are they going to have? Help them understand what that's going to look like and build that into the job description. The second is around, why does this role matter? And who will it impact inside and outside the organization? So really think about what does impact mean when it comes to this role, right? What fundamentally does this person touch? It could be little things with the team and helping them be successful. It could be broader things, but help them understand that impact and help them connect the dots between the work they're going to do and the organization's overall success. Because when an employee who is purpose-oriented, when a candidate who's purpose-oriented sees that line between their impact to the organization and ultimately to your customers, that's what makes that job so compelling. And it is very rare that I find a job description that does that well. And finally, growth. What challenges and growth opportunities does this job provide? When someone takes this job, how are they going to get stretched? What are they going to be able to do to really grow as a human being? And yes, this is about what programs you have. Yes, it's about what classes they might be able to take. But it's really here about something much more. It's about what are things they're going to be able to do to take risks? What are some of the things they're going to be able to do to experiment? What is the culture around failure and risk-taking? Helping them understand how the role is going to let them grow. And I would say this often is the most important variable when I talk to purpose-oriented candidates. They want to know that there's a constant culture of growth, that they're constantly going to be stretched as part of the role. So as homework on this one, really encourage you to take your current job description when you're posting, any job description in your organization, and really look at it critically through this lens about, is it communicating these things, or is it saying simply, here's what we need you to do for us? Because yes, that needs to be in there, but if you're not saying what you're going to be giving to them, you're not saying the right message. Next, I want to talk a little bit about onboarding with purpose. How do you, in the first 90 days someone's on the job, really help someone get started the right way? And one of the best things you can do is to really look at that early process we talked about around someone's development as a leader. What are you doing to help them build the desire, the self-awareness, and then the belief that purpose is going to be possible in this job? What signals are you sending them up front about those? And then as they move into the job in the first 90 days, what are you doing to activate that? What are you doing to help them see the relationships that are everywhere? What are you doing to help them see the impact they can be making? And what are you doing to help them see those growth opportunities? You want to turn those lenses on for them so that they start off with that abundance mindset and they see their own agency to do that. So up front, as you're looking at a 90-day plan for someone in the first 3 months on the job, who are the people they need to get to know? And I would go further than that and really think about, what is it that you think they should be doing as they get to know that person? How should they be thinking about that relationship? What is success in that relationship? How can they connect both personally and professionally with that person? Who is, their anchor champion, advocate in the organization? Who are some people that can be there for them if they're struggling? Who are some people in other parts of the organization that will just help them understand the lay of the land? Maybe it's some customers. Who are some customers they should get to know? Trying to really think about how to help them, again, start to see and build those early relationships. Second piece is impact. Really being thoughtful about how you set their goals so that you can connect the impact they want to make to the goals you need them to achieve. And this is where knowing their purpose drivers and knowing what their purpose is so powerful, because you're able to start to look at, okay, if someone cares mostly about impacting individuals, how do I frame their job that way, right? If they care mostly about organizations, how do I frame their job that way? They care about how they're impacting broader trends. How do I frame their goals that way? So helping them see that and helping them in their first 90 days have some early wins that show them that they can make that impact. And to help them also think about, a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, how could their purpose translate into a much bigger impact? So they see that roadmap and they start to, again, see a mindset of abundance, which gives them belief and agency to hack their job over time, to become leaders and be wildly successful. And that ties directly to growth. What do they need to learn to get up to speed, right? And part of that learning is just how to do email on your system. What are the HR policies? Some of the sort of basic rote stuff. But in the first 90 days, you should be doing things to help them really push their boundaries and get them a little bit outside their comfort zone and have a couple of growth wins that are satisfying. Filling out your HR forms is not satisfying, for most of us anyway. Being able to set up your email is not that satisfying from a growth standpoint. Growth is about really doing a few things that challenge them. Maybe it's meetings with people that put them a little bit outside their comfort zone. Maybe it's about having them do a deliverable that forces them to push a little harder or go into an area they don't know as well. Push them and see what they're capable of. Let them go out on like a equivalent of taking a car out on a racetrack. Like push them to their limit a little bit, see what they can do and see if they can thrive. So what I'm describing is a pretty fundamental redesign of the first 90 days of someone's job, really rethinking how that experience works for them. I next want to talk about managing purpose. So you've hired this amazing purpose-driven person. You've helped them build the agency. You've helped them really make their job in the first 90 days set up for success. But hopefully that's just the beginning of a long journey. How do you start moving into those next steps where people get into that flow and they start becoming leaders? What we've found is it's really critical for managers to regularly have conversations with team members about meaning. If a manager can't articulate what relationships matter to an employee, what impact they want to have, and how that person wants to grow, they don't know enough about their employee. They've got to have these insights and they've got to regularly be having these conversations. And it's so cool when you see this conversation happen, because typically employees aren't used to being able to have these great conversations, and it builds such a bond, so much trust, and starts to create the environment in which there's the psychological safety for people to really go out and become superheroes. So as a manager, you really want to ask questions of your team regularly, like, do you have the meaningful relationships you need in your work? How can you work to invest more in relationships? Are you prioritizing it in your work? Are you spending too much time on emails and texts and other ways of communicating that aren't authentic? Are you taking people out for coffee? Are you starting meetings asking about personal relationships and about people's lives? What are you doing to actually build authentic connection between people? This is so critical, and it includes the relationship between the manager and that employee. So one of the most important relationship sort of hacks is for the manager to also share what is their purpose, what is their path, what impact and growth do they want to have, and talk about how that employee can help them. Because when you have a purpose-driven culture, it's not just hierarchical. You should have your employees helping you develop purpose and vice versa, because we're all in this to help each other's superpowers emerge and to be deeply fulfilled. Then you want to help them have conversations about impact. Are you making an impact in your work that is personally meaningful to you? It's a great question, and it's something you should be asking of yourself and everyone on your team regularly. And when you see there's a gap there, it's talking about what would it look like to fill that gap? What are they doing to solve for it? How can you be their advocate, their champion? Don't solve it for them, but how can you be that champion? How can you help them understand the pathway? How could you increase your impact going forward? What would that look like? What are the opportunities? And a lot of times when people say they're not making enough impact, the problem is they're not cognitively appreciating the impact they're already making. It's not necessarily about doing more. A lot of times they're just not seeing their impact. So for example, a lot of jobs you don't see the end impact of your work. So one of the things you can do as an organization is make time to go see that ripple effect. Think about a recruiter, right? Recruiter hires someone, they put them on a team, and they're on to the next spot to fill. But how much more powerful is it if 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, they go back and meet with that person, they meet with the team and say, hey, how's it going? And see how having placed that person made a huge difference on that team. That is an example of not having to do more, but it's being able to appreciate and have gratitude and see the ripple effect of what you do. I think especially in talent and HR, we often do things, but then we don't invest to go and see how did that turn out. We don't go back and actually have those conversations afterwards because we're on to the next thing. That's a big mistake because we're losing that sense of impact for the work we're doing and turning our work into a transaction, not into an act of impact. Finally, growth. Really talking to people about what were your greatest learning moments in the last year, really helping people understand what were the things they grew from, because often it's not the things you think it was or even the things they thought about. How can you create more of those for that person? Really push them to say, when did you feel pushed? When did you get out of your comfort zone? When did you actually feel like you grew as a human being? And people should be having those pretty regularly. You don't want that every single day or else it's exhausting, but they need to be having those and building self-awareness about what those are and pushing themselves to do that. So these are really fundamentally different conversations to have with employees and to have employees talk to their managers about and to build a culture where you can share these types of conversations. At the end of the day, what we believe is critical to a culture in which this Y generation, where purpose can thrive, where people can start to perform at ridiculous levels to be superheroes, is that everyone has to realize that purpose is a choice. It is not your job as an employer to give someone purpose. You cannot put it on a pay stub and say, here's your 8 units of purpose. You can't just create a beautiful purpose statement or create a cause for your organization and say, boom, we're done. It is a choice as an organization to embrace purpose, to create a culture where it's easier. But your main job is to help every employee go back to desiring purpose, becoming self-aware about purpose, having that fundamental belief that it's possible, having the ambition of seeing purpose all around them, having the agency and the tools to be able to start to hack their job, to move from that into being able to actually be in alignment and flow where just purpose is defining their every move, to then become leaders who are courageous and stand for their values. They stand for what's right. They believe that it's not just about making sure they go with the flow, but that they're doing the right thing, because that's so powerful. That they're then able to inspire others, to develop others, to help bring out purpose in other people, to help them have that courage. And then finally, to be able to have that sort of visionary leadership. This is a journey that every step of the way is a choice. People need to fundamentally choose purpose, and for you to create those easy ways for people to be able to do this. And I want to encourage each of you, at this conference, at this virtual conference all around the world, you are leaders. And if everyone on this call chose purpose, it would change the world. It would change your organizations, and it would change your own work itself. There are enough people that are part of this event that are touching millions of lives, that if we make this change, we're going to see better well-being of people, better economic performance. Everything about our society will improve because we'll embrace a growth mindset. We'll embrace abundance. We will embrace everything that's necessary to fundamentally change work, to make all work feel like pro bono work. And that's ultimately what this is about. We've got to address these issues. I am a father. I've got an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. And a lot of why I started down this path and started this company Imperative is because I saw that the world of work that I was working in at that moment was not the world I wanted my kids to enter when they graduate from high school, from college, whatever it is when they get to that age, that is their entree into the workforce. I want them to enter a workforce where purpose is the assumed MO. It is how people think about work. It is how leaders like yourselves define success. And we can do this together. And I ask you each to choose purpose. That even on rough days, when you're operating out of fear, when you're scared, when you're trying to think, you're scared to take risks, to remember that when you stand strong, when you have that courage, when you inspire others, when you fundamentally are willing to have a vision for a better future, for my kids, for your kids, your grandkids, for our society, that's when you've made a difference. And to help support you, because I fundamentally believe that people that are in this conference can change the world, I want to offer that anyone who's interested in being able to use our assessment to define your purpose, I'm happy to provide you a free promo code so that you can take our assessment and define your purpose drivers and begin to take that first step of choosing purpose for yourself, which will help spark your inspiration to be able to change your team, your talent department, your organization, your community, your industry, the world. So if anyone wants to choose purpose, I want to encourage you to reach out and just email me and say, I choose purpose. And when you do that, I will send you a free code so that you can take this assessment and begin to fundamentally walk down this journey and to thrive in this new Y generation. And with that, I want to thank you for your courage, your inspiration, and your vision. We're all counting on you to make this difference. You are more important than any role in the workforce because you're the one who can create this change. And in closing, I want to thank the sponsors of this amazing conference today. I want to thank Cornerstone, who's actually been a friend of mine for many years in my work with the Taproot Foundation. Intello, an amazing organization. HireVue, which is an organization, if you guys haven't checked out their products and what they do, get on it. And Smashfly, who's smashing it out of the park today and making this happen. So just thank you all for making this event come together to help inspire all of us to realize our potential.